I think it was opportunistic. I think it was in a moment of high rage.
Information no one had except the person who must have put that knife inside of her.
He had 45 bullets in his body.
The intent was clearly to kill those officers and those first responders.
The reason we've been so successful with the police is because we target on the prolific offenders.
And it's a matter of building a mountain of evidence.
He is a man who will never again walk the streets of this city or any community.
Hello, I'm Dan Satterberg. Welcome to the Prosecutor's Post. In this program, we take a closer look at the issues impacting criminal justice in our community. We also introduce you to some of the men and women who work for justice every day. Today, we're happy to have Sergeant Rich O'Neill, who's the president of the Seattle Police Officers Guild. Hi, Rich.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming in for some questioning today. You have the right to remain silent, but if you don't say anything, this is going to be a pretty short show. So what I really want to know from you is about the life of a police officer, and particularly here in Seattle.
Well, the life of a police officer is very diverse. We have on Seattle over 1,250 officers, and just like any occupation, we have officers who enjoy all kinds of different activities. Many of them are coaches and parents, and they work out in the schools and in their churches. But when they come to work, you know, the role of a police officer is 24/7, and that in and of itself, you know, creates a lot of challenges.
Now, 1,250 officers for a city the size of Seattle, how does that compare to other cities around the country?
Well, it's not as high as we would like. Over the last couple of years, we've made some strides to have more officers, but we're still not there where we'd like to be. For instance, Boston has about the same population, and they have between almost 3,000 and 5,000 officers.
Tell me a little bit about your career. Where did you start as a rookie?
Well, this spring I'll have 30 years. As a rookie after the academy, I started in Rainier Valley and worked there in West Seattle. I then went and worked downtown in 1984, the first in Pike area, which is a lot different than it is now. And then I moved into the DUI squad, which looking back was probably the most rewarding time I had. I did 4 years there. I got promoted after 17 years as what I call a worker bee, and then was sent up to the North Precinct in the U District at night. So certainly was a challenging assignment there.
Now, you've seen our city in a way that most citizens never will. You just said that things are different today than they were when you started out as a rookie. Can you describe in what way?
Well, over the past 30 years, I mean, the city has changed, the city has grown. For instance, the First and Pike area back in the mid-'80s was you know, a lot of businesses, a lot of bars that were just caused a lot of trouble. And there's different troubles today, but I would have to say that the city has changed for the better, and that we have, you know, for instance, technology on the police department has improved our job for the most part, but also brought new challenges.
Now, 30 years into your career, you have another role, and that's to be the president of the Police Officers Guild. Tell us a little bit about the Guild and what your mission is.
Well, the Seattle Police Officers Guild is the largest police labor union in the Northwest, and we represent all of the officers and the sergeants on the department. So it's we are the biggest in the Northwest, like I said, and our job basically is to you know, negotiate working conditions and to protect the working conditions and improve them for the officers.
Now, unlike a lot of unions, you don't have the right to go on strike or to slow down the work, do you?
No, it's you know, federal law that we can't do that, but we do have, you know, collective bargaining, and we do have arbitration is where we settle a lot of our disputes.
What kind of perspective do you get as the president of the Police Guild that maybe the police chief or any police chief might not see? Well, how do you see the world differently than maybe the brass?
Well, I see it as you know, the vast majority of our officers, for instance, have never even had any allegations of misconduct. I think the last statistic was 85% have never even had a complaint made against them. So I see officers that are out there working hard, doing their jobs, trying to do the right thing, and you know, oftentimes when they do make a mistake, it's front page headlines, and you know, they're second guessed, I think, more than any occupation that I've ever seen.
We expect a lot of our officers, and the city has also put in place a review process for allegations of misconduct. What do you think of that process, and are there places that we could improve it?
Well, you know, the Seattle Police Department, I think, is a model for review and accountability. They've actually received awards nationally for the model that they have in place. It's a multi-tiered model where there's different layers of scrutiny and accountability. And the officers are working within it, and they're working within the system. I think one of the biggest areas that they can improve is in where they focus their attention. I think sometimes our accountability system focuses on very small, you know, just unimportant issues. And I think if they focused on serious acts of misconduct, I think the system would work better.
Do you get a chance to sit down with rookies on their first couple weeks of the job and maybe impart some veteran advice?
Well, I would try to. I see our class, our rookie classes, as they come through for an orientation session. And, you know, yes, I try to tell them, you know, how to go about having a good career. I've had a good career, and I think one of the best pieces of advice I ever got 30 years ago was, number one, don't take yourself too seriously, and number two, have outside interests. I think an officer who maintains outside interests away from the department just has a healthier perspective.
You know, the billboard for recruiting officers says, Seattle Police Department, a job like no other. What does that mean to you, having been in the department for so long?
Well, it truly is a job like no other. I think that it is in a city like no other because again, I think we have a unique city. It's the city that we all, you know, love here in Seattle, but it has its own challenges because oftentimes, like I said, the scrutiny that the police come under in Seattle, it's not the same as in other parts of the country.
So give me an idea, what's the best part of the job, being a police officer, and then what's the worst part of the job?
I think the best part of the job, being a police officer, is really seeing that you made a difference. Maybe it's just a small 911 call that might seem routine, but that when you're finished with the call, you've made a difference. Or like in my career in the DUI squad, when you're taking a drunk off the road that night, you know you may be prevented, you know, some real tragedy. The worst parts of the job, I think, are when, again, you're trying to do the right thing and you're trying to do your job, and yet you have people with very limited knowledge of law enforcement casting an opinion of you and second-guessing you, and oftentimes they have the information wrong. So it's that second-guessing that sometimes you know, is very hard to deal with for officers.
And is that where the Guild steps in to provide some support?
Well, we try to. We try to make sure that you know, accountability is very important, but that the process is followed so that it's fair for all involved, the officer and, of course, the citizen making the allegation.
I imagine being out on the street day after day and seeing the worst in human behavior can be a real stressful job. How do people in the force, how do they kind of leave that behind? How do they go home and resume their role as a father or a husband or a neighbor?
Well, I think that's the challenge. I think an officer who has you know, a diverse way of dealing with the stress is much healthier than the officer who doesn't have any outside interests. So I think you know, the officer that is able to say, this is my job, but it's not who I am. When I go home, I won't take the job with me, and it's challenging. There are many groups around the country. We have one, a family support group, that actually helps the families of officers and the children of officers, because, you know, going through high school or junior high when your dad is a police officer, it seems like everybody in the class knows that. So that presents challenges. But I think the officer, again, who can have outside interest, well varied outside interest, I think does well.
But imagine at the bottom line, it's not just what you do, it is who you are. You're a police officer 24/7. People see you in that way, and they expect you to be there when they need you. Am I right?
And that is, you are correct. I mean, even in our manual, it says that if you're in the city and you see something, you're supposed to take action. You are a police officer, and you know, I think the officers who can deal with that pressure, again, by having outside interests, are healthier for it.
Now, in the prosecutor's office, our interaction with police officers is certainly on a daily basis, but it's always in court. And court's a different place. When you're out on the street, you're taught to be in command, but when you're in court, you're not really in charge. What's that like when you show up to testify in court?
Well, there are frustrations in our court system. Officers sometimes will experience frustration just in scheduling, for instance. Coming to court, and it tends to move very slowly. It's a very important process, but it tends to move slowly, and the officers are sometimes frustrated with that. But they know it is a very important part of the job, just like the arrest is. You have to do your paperwork. That's a very important job, and then the quality of your report is going to assist the prosecutor in getting justice served. And it just sometimes, because of the slowness of the process, will frustrate an officer. The courts of our country also set out the rules that you have to operate on, and sometimes those change. Mm-hmm. Recently, we had a major change from the United States Supreme Court that affected the search of automobiles incident to arrest. You used to be able to search the whole car when you've arrested the driver. Now you can't. What's that like, and how do you deal with that, those changing rules out there on the street? Well, our department has a legal advisor who stays on top of these ever-changing court decisions and then disseminates the information to the officers. But it is frustrating for the officer to, one day you could search the trunk, this day you can't, or this day you have to get a warrant. And it's forever changing. But it is part of the job. I mean, we're there to uphold the law, and the law, we don't make the law, we just enforce it. And I think the officer has to stay on top of these things, to be effective. Rich, I want to get your thoughts about this remarkable time that we've just been through with terrible tragedies in our community involving the slaying of Officer Timothy Brenton and then the slaying of the 4 Lakewood police officers. This is something that we've never seen before. I've never seen it in my 30 years. The Lakewood tragedy was the single worst tragedy in law enforcement in the history of Washington State. I think it's changed the way we think. It definitely changes the way I think officers will approach their job now. And the other thing that has changed is officers really getting an outpouring of community support. You kind of know that most people support you and want you, but those people tend to be more silent, and the critics tend to be more vocal. And over about the past 8 weeks, we've seen just the opposite. The outpouring of support has been incredible, and I think that is a good thing. The officers know now that there is vocal supporters out there for them. So we've seen both the worst of human behavior, some real evil acts, random targeting of police officers, but on the other hand, you've seen people who want to come out and tell you that they really love you and appreciate you. Absolutely, and that's really what keeps officers going, is to know that there are people out there who need them, that depend on them, and sometimes the officer is the only thing between this evil overtaking some poor innocent person. It's the officer that stands in between. I know there's a lot of people out there who have those feelings, and they really want to tell the police officer that they see on the street, maybe somebody they don't even know, but they want to be able to say, I'm sorry this happened to police officers, and I really appreciate it. What's the best way for a citizen to approach an officer and just try to communicate that? I think just by being casual. I think it doesn't have to be any big formal presentation. Just a wave, a smile sometimes. If you see an officer out on their beat, if they pull over and they want to talk to you, just a casual, friendly, like I said, just something as simple as a wave can let an officer know that the community is there for them and supports them, is glad to see them in their neighborhood. Well, I'm glad to see you here, and I appreciate all the work that you and your officers do to keep the citizens of Seattle safe every day. Thank you very much, Rich. Thank you. And thank you for being with us. If you'd like to find out more about your prosecuting attorney's office and other programs we're working on, visit our website. I'm Dan Satterberg. Thanks for joining us.